Hey, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Welcome to What the F Happened. My name's Stephen Nagy, and I'll be running solo today. Chris had to hop on a last-minute flight down to Miami, doing a podcast with, I don't know if I'm supposed to say yet. So Chris down in Miami doing a podcast, and Shauna had a last-minute meeting, so cannot join. So I'll be talking with you today about what's going on in the news over the last week. So it's going to be a little bit different. Usually I can pull stories up while Chris is talking and we kind of roll with it from there. So I don't really have too much pulled up. So I'm going to kind of do it live with you guys. But if anybody has any good stories, let me know. Let me go live on Instagram here. All right, cool. Hey, welcome Instagram. All right. So if anybody's seen any good stories in the news, just send them over in the chat box and I will hit those. Otherwise, going to kind of walk through what's going on, what that looks like, and we'll go from there with it today. So a little different format, but we'll have some fun with it. So we run this quick little 27-second promo introduction, and I'll be right back. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to What the F Happened. My name's Stephen Nagy. I'll be hosting the show this morning on behalf of Chris Nagy, who had to hop on a flight down to Miami to do a podcast today. And so I'm running solo. So shoot over any stories you see in the comments. Interact with me. Let's have some fun with it. I'm going to wing this thing. There you go, Dex. I'm going to wing it. That's right, baby. So we're going to wing this thing. At 10 a.m., I did see that Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is going to be holding a news conference, or he's going to be talking about what the Fed is expecting coming up. So if I think about it in about 20 minutes at 10 a.m., maybe I'll pull that up and we'll tune into what Federal Reserve Jerome Powell has to say about the economy, about inflation, about everything going on, and what their forward guidance might look like when it comes to interest rates. So we'll tune into that at 10 a.m. It's pretty important right now. The something I just started, actually. So as you guys know, a lot of you know, we do a lot of what is called the infinite banking concept, IBC. And that's where, becoming your own banker comes from and everything that we do. And the infinite banking concept was coined. That phrase was coined. And the strategy that we use today was really brought to the forefront, brought to the public through a guy by the name of R. Nelson Nash. And so R. Nelson Nash, back in, when was this book originally published? Let me see if I can see on here. Maybe in copyright 2000. So if anybody knows when this book was originally published, I don't actually know that, but Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. This is kind of what we call like the Bible of what we teach and the foundation. And we've taken what R. Nelson Nash really coined in this book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and we've built incredible strategies around it. We built new tools. We've really taken the infinite banking concept to the next level and what we're able to do with it this day and age. So it's really cool to see that. And so what I decided to do is go ahead and go through the Infinite Banking Practitioners Certification Program to become a certified infinite banking practitioner. Obviously, I've been teaching it and helping others with it for several years now. So this is just allowing me to get more knowledge, more education to share with all of you. So I've just started taking this course, the Infinite Banking Certified Practitioner Program. So super excited. Just started going through this. It's a huge book, and there's a bunch of videos that go along with it and education. And it's all built on it really talks about Austrian economics and the foundation of money and sound money and what that looks like. And a lot of you guys know that a lot of that was thrown out the window when we were pulled from the gold standard and the introduction of the Federal Reserve System. And if you've never read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Go check it out. It really talks all about the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve System. And it's pretty wild because, like a lot of government bills that have names, such as the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act was a bill that the Biden administration passed, and it was all about reducing inflation, right? I mean, that's in the name, the Inflation Reduction Act. But really, like a lot of bills that Congress passes, they a lot of times are opposite of what the bill really means. Not always, but often. And so the Inflation Reduction Act has been touted as a spending bill that pumped trillions of dollars into our economy at a time when that wasn't necessarily good for the economy. And what it's done is it's driven inflation. It gave us 8-9% year over year inflation. We're still hovering right now about 3.5% inflation. Everybody sees it at the grocery stores, buying things. Cost of stuff is always way more. And so what this infinite banking practitioners program really does is it takes it back to what does sound money look like? What does it look like to eliminate this a lot of people call it a cabal, the banking system, all the worldwide bankers, central banks out there, so it really compares that. So I'm looking forward to really diving more into all of that and learning more about it. It's something I've always kind of learned on a surface level, but never really got deep with. So the rest of the summer, I'm going to be devoting some time to diving into that. And a lot of our money mentors on our team have been through the program. So really cool. So we'll tune in at 10 o'clock and listen to a little bit about what Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has to say. But in the meantime, let me pull up some news articles. So what's been going on this week, guys? Throw it over in the chat box. Let's see. Justin said Trump challenged Biden to some golf. $1 million on the line for charity. Can start with an entertaining story. Yeah, I actually did see that. Let me see. This is where I need Chris to talk for a few minutes while I take the time to pull the story up because I do have it saved. So let me just pull up that story real fast. And so what's been going on while I'm pulling that up, let me just let you guys know. So what's been going on for the last 2 weeks, and we hit on it last week. So 13 days ago, a little under 2 weeks ago, was the first presidential debate of the 2024 election cycle. So we had President Joe Biden versus former President Donald Trump. And it was an embarrassing night for President Joe Biden. And I don't know what other way to say that. Post-debate, during the debate, he really fumbled his words multiple times, was really incoherent, couldn't form a full sentence, couldn't keep a train of thought going through a whole paragraph. He would start talking about one thing, trail off into something else, and finish with something completely made up. At one point, going on a rant and finish talking about defeating Medicare, just as an example. And it never got better throughout the night, really. It was just a bad night. And so as soon as the debate ended, we started to see the knives come out. And CNN, who, a lot of has really spread a lot of propaganda over the last many years and really just told stories that are just made up and fabricated and turned journalists into just propagandists. And it's been kind of wild to see. We've talked about it over the last several years on this show, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. And so it was pretty wild to see right after the debate, CNN coming out just, how can Biden be the next president? Biden needs to step down. That was the worst performance we've ever seen in debate history, and just really just running Biden over with a bus. And so ever since that day, 2 weeks ago almost, it's been a roller coaster. Okay. And if you've been following this, you guys know what I'm talking about. So the legacy media has really come out against Biden. He needs to step down. Even Joe Scarborough, who just Morning Joe, if you guys follow MSNBC, but Joe Scarborough 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks before the debate, came out with a long segment, just starting out at 6 a.m. in the morning. Fuck you to anybody that doesn't think Joe Biden can make it. And that's Joe Scarborough's words, not mine. You guys can go back and watch his segment, and just saying he's known Joe Biden for 30, 40 years, and they've been good friends, and Joe has never been more sharp, and Joe Biden's never been more in charge and more fit to lead the country. And Joe Scarborough, after the debate, even came out and said, hey, there's a problem. That wasn't the Joe Biden that I know. Maybe, it's time for him to step down. And then a week later, less than a week and a half later, just this week, Monday morning, Joe Biden called into Joe Scarborough's show, and they did a radio interview. It wasn't on video, it was a radio interview. And Joe Scarborough did everything he could to prop Biden back up. And even that radio call-in, if you watched it, it was not good. Biden lost his train of thought. You could hear him ruffling through notes that he had sitting there. You could tell he was just literally reading off of the pages, trying to list out all these talking points and bullet points of what his administration has done. So it's been ugly. Okay. I mean, I guess to sum it all up, long story short, the last 2 weeks have been ugly. And we saw a lot of politicians come out, Democratic Party politicians come out at first saying, no way Biden needs to step down. No way he can be our president. They all did not all of them, but a lot of them. Nancy Pelosi and the New York guy, Chuck Schumer, and the rest of them. They originally said, no, Biden's got to step down. He can't be our leader nominee. And now they've done a 180. Actually, we got to wait and see. We still think Joe's the guy. We stand behind Joe Biden. So it's been kind of funny to watch that. More sad to watch that. And even this morning, still, I mean, I saw Nancy Pelosi this morning saying, well, if Joe wants to be the president, then we'll stand behind him. But ultimately, it's up to him. So she's still hedging her bets on which way to go. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a wild rest of the week. Whether Joe Biden survives or not, sitting behind Joe is Kamala Harris, which, boy. Maybe if you guys want, I'll play some Kamala Harris videos, because I do have a bunch of those. If you just want to kind of see who's waiting in the wings right now to take over the Democratic presidential ticket, good luck there, man. So we could play some of that if you guys want. But long story short, it's been a wild week in politics, in presidential politics. And during all of this, what makes me kind of have some hope if Donald Trump does become the elected president later this year is I'm hoping maybe Donald Trump has learned from some of the mistakes he made in his first term as president. And if you watch the debate, you can see how Trump did things a lot differently than when he was debating back in 2020 and back in 2016. Trump seemed to really control himself. He didn't have a lot of the attacks. He didn't, yell at Biden and come off as the crazy person. Ironically, Joe Biden was the one yelling at Trump a lot and kind of looking like the crazy old guy. And so it almost seemed like Trump started to learn from some of his mistakes that he made in the past, and kind of came off as the cool, calm, and collected guy that actually knew what he was talking about. And so that was interesting to see. And so Trump has done pretty good over the last couple of weeks. We were expecting a vice presidential nomination, who Trump was going to pick as his vice presidential running mate for the 2024 election. And Trump really has not been in the news. He's been out there campaigning. He's been out there doing his big rallies that he does. But he's been pretty quiet, and that's learning. When it comes to politics, one of the first rules of politics is when your opponent is in trouble, you don't do anything to get in the way of that. Let it play out. And that's exactly what it seems like Trump is doing right now. He's not making any crazy announcements. He's not announcing his VP. He's not doing anything to bring him back into the headlines. He's just letting, hey, the Democrats are a mess right now. Let them run with it. Let them do what they're doing. I don't want to step in the way of that. And so Trump back in 2020 or 2016, I don't think he would have responded this way. I think he would have been right back out there saying, I need to get the spotlight back. I need the headlines back on my name. And he's not doing that. So has he learned from some of his mistakes? Could he make a better president in 2024 than he was back in 2016 to 2020? Let's hope so, because it seems every single day that he is more and more likely to become the 2024 next U.S. president. And polling is showing that. Everything is showing that right now. I mean, it could happen very easily right now. So we'll keep an eye on all that. I'll continue to follow that just because it's pretty interesting to me. Let me see if we got any comments going over here. Yeah, Drew, I think he's holding back till he figures out if Biden is the guy or not. Exactly right. So I think we'll probably know more by the end of this week. Bottom line is the Democrats are running out of time to replace Biden if they want to, and they have some trouble. So there's some things. You can't just replace Joe Biden as the presidential candidate. First off, all the preliminary, there's already been elections held that pick Biden as the presidential nominee, him and Kamala Harris. So if Biden steps down, Kamala has to be the person just by rules. They can't have Biden step down and get rid of Kamala. And a lot of that has to do with fundraising. So they have a couple $100 million raised in fundraising money that they're going to use for the election and, television ads and different campaigns and things like that. And so if Biden and Kamala are not, if one of them are not the ticket, all those funds are with Biden and Kamala. So they can't just give those couple $100 million in funds to a new presidential ticket. And so they have to start fresh. They'd have to start fundraising and raising money and rebuild up that war chest that they have. And so that's a huge problem right there. Like I mentioned, Kamala is pretty tough candidate. If you've paid attention to politics over the last several years, they've taken a second look at Kamala multiple times. Most people realized over the last several years that Biden has been aging, and unfortunately, it has been affecting his mental capacity. Whether it's dementia, whether it's Parkinson's, whether it's just old age, there's been a lot of debate about that in the medical community. But regardless of what it is, we can all see it. Even since the debate, he has not been able to go out there and instill confidence in anybody that he can actually do this job for the next 4 months to become the president again, let alone the next 4 years. So regardless of even if Biden pulled off some miracle and somehow we're not going to say they cheat, right? We're not going to say they're going to cheat, but somehow Biden becomes the president again. I think everyone is in consensus that he will never survive as the president for the next 4 years. Just mentally, it just can't happen. So we will have Kamala at some point. And over the last several years, people have recognized that. So we've had second looks and third looks and fourth looks and fifth looks and ninth looks and 900 looks at Kamala Harris that the media has done. And every time they just kind of go back, and she's an interesting person. Go look into Kamala's history and how she worked her way up the ladder and where she came from and how she's gotten to the position she's gotten in today. And it tells you a lot about modern politics. It tells you a lot about where we are as a country right now when it comes to politics. Just her rise in politics tells a lot. It's very telling. So I'd recommend going back and looking at that. Or maybe we'll put together a segment on that one of these days. But anyways, all right. So what kind of news do we got right here? So there's also been a lot of Supreme Court decisions that have come out here over the last couple weeks that make a big impact on this country. This is one that I'll just kind of hit some of the bullet points on. So with Chevron, so there was I'll read through this. So with Chevron reversal, Supreme Court paves way for a legal earthquake. So the Supreme Court remanded 9 cases to lower courts last week in light of its reversal of landmark precedent known as Chevron deference. This batch of cases may be the first indication of the legal upheaval that could play out across the U.S. judiciary now that one of the most widely cited Supreme Court decisions has been overturned. Several conservative anti-regulation groups have been preparing for the post-Chevron world by planning legal challenges and lobbying efforts, according to a new report. So basically 4 days after the Supreme Court ruled in the in the case of Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo, overturning the 40-year-old president known as Chevron deference, the justices announced they would be sending 9 cases back to lower courts in light of their ruling. So if you didn't follow this, basically it was a 1984 ruling, Chevron versus Natural Resources Defense Council, which let judges defer to federal agencies' interpretation of statutes when language is unclear. So basically what happened is they made a ruling back in 1984 that federal agencies are allowed to basically establish and create rules and then enforce those rules. So, the arguments on both sides of this are, like, for example, the EPA, when it comes to protecting the environment and the earth, the EPA had a lot of power to be able to basically have their own experts go in and say, hey, this waterway over here, this company over here is affecting this waterway. So we're going to regulate this company over here and what they're able to do with this waterway. And over the years, it's created a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, a lot of regulation around what companies are allowed to do. And it all led up to, here in recent years, it led up to a fishing company. And so up north, I think it was up in northeast, in Maine or somewhere up that way, Massachusetts maybe. It's a huge fishing community up in the Massachusetts, Connecticut area, and up into Maine and the Northeast. And so what happened is, and I know a lot of this because one of my good friends is a commercial lobster diver, and he's always telling me about the different regulations and what they do for the fish populations. And it's pretty wild when you actually have an inside look on it all. But what happened with the Supreme Court decision was these regulators up in the Northeast, they made a requirement where commercial fishermen had to bring a regulator on the boat with them to go out on these fishing expeditions, and the regulators would oversee what was happening to make sure they were doing things the right way, basically. And at first, the regulators, the agency was paying for the regulators to go out there. And then it came to be where the regulators were forcing the fishing companies to pay themselves to have these regulators on board with them to make sure things were done right. And basically the fishing companies said, well, this is too costly. We can't afford to pay for these regulators to come out. They're not actually doing anything anyways. This is BS. So they sued the regulators essentially, and it got pushed all the way up to the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court, and the lower courts basically use Chevron deference as the reason why the regulators were allowed to make the commercial fisheries pay for these regulators to go out on the boats with them. Okay, so that's basically the essence of it. So the Supreme Court got involved, and they went back and they looked at what the Chevron decision was back then and why it was made. And basically the Supreme Court said this is unconstitutional. The Constitution doesn't give the right for these federal bureaucracies to have unelected administrators create and enforce rules. That's not the way that the United States of America works. We have 3 branches of government, and it needs to go back to doing things the right way, where the Congress creates laws, the judiciary approves those laws and enforces those laws, and of course, the third branch, the executive branch, can veto and all the rest of it. But the Congress needs to make the laws, and the judiciary needs to actually be the ones that enforce those laws, essentially. And so they said no more. And so people have been freaking out about it. It's going to allow all these companies to go do all this bad stuff again. No, it's just taking away all the bureaucracy and red tape that's really causing a lot of problems in this country one way or another. And we see a lot of it. I mean, Elon Musk talks a lot about it. If you guys follow Elon Musk, what he says he goes through when it comes to some of the rockets he launches and some of the stuff he does with Tesla and everything else, the Boring Company. He talks a lot about how the red tape and the regulation just really halts innovation and halts progress because of all that red tape. So, it's going to continue to play out. You can already see it. That's what that article was about. Some of these cases are now being pushed. Hey, you guys got to actually regulate this stuff through the judiciary. So we're going to continue to see this. So just something interesting I thought coming out. Let's see. Any comments on any of that? So Drew thinks they're going to swap out Biden at the convention. But again, Drew, I don't think it's that easy. I don't think they can just swap them out. There's a lot more involved. I mean, you talk about, Democrats are always calling Donald Trump a fascist and a dictator. And, the Republica publication just came out with Trump dressed as Hitler and called him Hitler and all this. It's so silly. But, all this stuff. And then you see okay, the people elected Biden, the people through the primaries reelected Biden to be the nominee. So now you're just going to say, okay, well, the people's vote doesn't count. We're going to take him out and just install somebody new as the candidate. That's going against the people's will. So I think there's a lot more issues than are on the surface of that. Let's see. Dexter said she could be the first woman president by default. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what would happen, right? Let's see. Interesting article by Ray Dalio about how he feels about the Democrats. I'll have to check that out, Strand. I haven't seen that, but I do like Ray Dalio. I'm just going to write that down to look that up. Let's see. Justin said, hopefully with the Chevron situation, the EPA will be easier on the diesel trucks on the emissions. Sure. Dex, more control to inflate the seafood. Yeah, I mean, it does. It's wild to see how the prices of seafood are affected by these regulations that they put. And the crazy thing is again, you have what happens a lot of times with bureaucracies is you have people that are making decisions that have never actually been in that industry. Because of their education, they are qualified with zero actual real world experience. And, at the end of the day, Chevron, all this regulation, all this, fascism, all this stuff. I mean, we saw a lot of it come out in COVID. Did we not? I mean, we had all these, experts and scientists telling us all this stuff about COVID that ended up just not being true. Whether it came to whether it was the shots, the vaxes, whether it was the masking, whether it was the 6 foot apart stuff, all of that came out years later to be basically bullshit. And so, we saw all these bureaucracies making all these regulations and rules and closing down beaches and skate parks and children parks and everything else. And it just all came out to be crap. And so I think, that's why I think we're starting to see a lot of this and why people are okay with some of these decisions, because we saw it all in the real world just recently in the last few years. So let's see what else we have here. Crypto Legend said, my man Chris just got my 3rd whole life policy. BYOB is the best thing anyone can do in the times we are in, period. Yeah, absolutely, Crypto Legend. And you're absolutely right about that. And we're going to talk all about that today at 1 o'clock Eastern on the Wealth Webinar. So join me today at 1 o'clock Eastern. Just go to chrisnoggle.com and scroll down the page a little bit. You'll see to register for free. Today's 1 o'clock Wealth Webinar. And when you register, we'll also give you 3 of our most popular digital books for free as well, just for registering. So you can get Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, the Private Money Guide Real Estate Edition, and How to Buy Cars and Get Back every dollar for every car you'll ever buy, drive, and own. If you were on Wealth Webinar last week, we actually showed Chris buying his dream Porsche on bringatrailer.com. So we actually started bidding at I think it was at 1:30, and it took 30 minutes. We finished bidding around 2 o'clock. He started bidding around the car was at like 40,000. He ended up winning it at $130,000. And then the second half of Wealth webinar, we showed everybody why he bought that car and how he was able to use his banking system to get back every dollar that he's using to buy that car with his banking system. So it was a really cool real world example of how Chris buys cars and is able to do so with his banking system. So today on Wealth Webinar, I'm going to go into a little bit more deep on the mechanics of how that works, of why we're able to start these banking systems and use them for things like buying dream cars to recapture all that money. So if you want to learn how to do that, join me today at 1 p.m. Eastern for the Wealth Webinar. Go to chrisnoggle.com and register for that for free. So I love that crypto legend. Oh, let's see. Linda said rules were made for them to break them. They will find a way to justify their actions. And yes, the people do matter. Yeah, I agree, Linda, 100%. I mean, we just saw, this is a wild story, actually. This just made me think of this. So with all of these Supreme Court decisions that have been coming out, guns are always part of that discussion when it comes to the Supreme Court. What does the Second Amendment mean? What does the right to, own and bear arms mean for the American people? What is the Second Amendment? That's always very controversial when it comes to politics, when it comes to the Supreme Court. And let me pull up a wild story that just happened in the last couple days. So Justice Sotomayor, Sonia Sotomayor, she's always been known as a Democratic Supreme Court justice. And, she's come out with some dissents on some of these opinions over the last couple of weeks that start to make me question how these people can be in a position like Supreme Court justice, because a couple of the dissents that Justice Sotomayor has written over the last couple of weeks have just been lies. I mean, they're easily provable lies, but she writes these dissents to give Democrats talking points to be able to rail against these decisions. It's everything's so political. And that's one of the reasons why when we do this show, we started doing this show, What the F Happened, to basically show you the real news. And it had to do a lot with money, because we see these job reports come out in the headlines on CNBC, and we see these inflation numbers, and we see these headlines of how great the economy is doing, and the stock market is unbelievable. You need to keep buying into it, and the stock market is where you need to put all your money, and everything is great and rosy and everything else. And it's just not true. It's just not true. And so we started this show to kind of bring you the real news. What is actually happening out there? What is actually going on in America today? And, we didn't want to get into politics, Trump and Biden, Republicans and Democrats. But unfortunately, it consumes everything that we do. And we see it. I mean, even in these Supreme Court decisions, things that you would think would be right for the American people and are great decisions, they go by the Constitution, they follow the Constitution. These dissents are just clearly go against the Constitution. And so Sotomayor is very well known for that. I mean, she's always doing things like this. And so this is a great example. And I'm not going to, so just yesterday or 2 days ago, Justice Sotomayor, let me just pull up the story. Let me see if it's on CNBC real fast. And they bury this stuff, like the mainstream media buries these stories because they completely contradict their entire narrative. So like I'm looking at the front page right now of, here, I'll just share. Heck was that? All right, let me just share my screen. I'll just show you guys what I'm looking at. All right, so we look at the front page of, I'm just trying to see if I can find the Sotomayor story anywhere. And we'll hit some of these stories in a second here. Oh yeah, Jerome Powell starts. Oh, he started right now. We'll go to him in a second. So I don't see anything about Sotomayor. Do you guys? Let me just do a quick search. Did I spell that wrong? Sotomayor. That's spelled right, right? Oops, there we go. All right, let's just Google it. How about that? All right, we can see that, right? Just a Sotomayor Google page. Okay, so here's the story. Let's pull up the New York Times. So U.S. Marshal shoots man in attempted carjacking near Sotomayor's home. So what happened is there was somebody sitting outside of Sotomayor's home. The marshal was sitting in an unmarked federal vehicle near the Supreme Court justice's home when a man approached the vehicle and pointed his handgun at him through the driver's side window. So the story is that Sotomayor is a Supreme Court justice. Obviously, she has armed protection, and rightfully so. I got no problem with that. But here's the irony of it, is Sotomayor has come out multiple times against people having the private right of armed defense. Sotomayor's come out multiple times against the Second Amendment. So, we hear this all through COVID. Rules for thee and not for me. So when Justice Sotomayor needs somebody with a gun to protect her from armed robbers, no problem. But if you or me need somebody with a gun to protect us from armed robbers, no, you don't have the right to do that. So it just, to me, that just sums up everything. Everything. It's all virtue. It's all politics. In real life, we need the Constitution. In real life, we need ways to protect ourselves. We need police. Do police have serious overreach sometimes? Are there corrupt police officers? Are there police officers that should not be police officers? 100%. But do we need police officers? 100%, 150%, 3,000%. Yes. And we see that playing out. I mean, I follow several real estate professionals around the country, and one of them is in San Francisco, and it's wild to see some of these beautiful neighborhoods in San Francisco that back in 2011, 2012, 2014, 2015, homes were selling for $1.5 million, let's say. And price it in San Francisco, and what's gone on in the rest of the country since 2015. If you bought a house in Florida in 2015, today in 2024, that house is worth probably triple. Okay. There are multiple beautiful neighborhoods. Well, it used to be beautiful neighborhoods in San Francisco right now. Houses that sold for $1.5 million in 2015 today are selling for 1.1, 1.2 million. They're worth 20, 30, 40% less than what they were in 2014, 2015. Why? Because San Francisco's lost all control. There's no crime. There's no punishment there anymore. And we're seeing it happen in some of these cities across the country. I mean, 4th of July week. This is a true story. I could pull up the video if you guys want to see it. The mayor of Chicago, there was over 100 people shot in Chicago over the 4th of July weekend. There was something like 17, somebody correct me, 17 people killed. It was a lot. There was a bunch of killings and shootings with guns in Chicago. The mayor of Chicago came out the last couple of days in a press conference, and you know what he blamed all the shootings on? The mayor of Chicago, shootings in 2024 that happened this weekend, now in Chicago, he blamed it on Richard Nixon. Okay. Now, I'm not a history buff, but the last I checked, was Richard Nixon president today? Was Richard Nixon president last year? 2 years ago? When was Richard Nixon president? Oh, let me just Google it. 1969 to 1974. Okay. So are these serious people? It's just, It's crazy to me, right? And so I don't understand it. I don't think anybody understands it. So we'll just keep talking about it because it's, if nothing else, very, very, very entertaining. All right, so let's do a quick little live look in on Jerome Powell. Let's see what he's chatting about. Can you guys hear that? Oops. Let me share it.
Management.
Yep.
Heightened mortgage rates make it prohibitive for new home buyers to reach the American dream of a starter home for their family. I am pleased that the Fed is resolute in getting inflation under control. I am pleased that you have committed to an apolitical approach to this. I am not pleased by the Fed's opaque, unjustified, politicized, and underanalyzed regulatory proposals, which will ultimately hurt all Americans. We need to know where the Fed is going on its fundamentally flawed Basel III Endgame proposal and its opaque regulatory approach. I yield.
Well, Chair now recognizes the ranking member of the Financial Institutions and Monetary Policy Subcommittee, Mr. Foster, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair McHenry and Ranking Member Waters. I'd like to also thank you, Chair Powell, for joining us today and for the role you have played in combating inflation and supporting a stable economic recovery. While the presidency is often the focus of political pronouncements about macroeconomic conditions, there's no question that that undersells the importance and the independence of the work of the Federal Reserve Board. While actions taken by the President and Congress certainly play a significant role, monetary policy decisions made by an independent Federal Reserve are the big dog in shaping macroeconomic conditions that shape economic outcomes for millions of Americans. And work continues on inflation, but significant progress has been made to bring the country in line with the Fed's 2% target. The good news is that macroeconomic policy is working as designed. Well-calibrated monetary policy with fiscal support from the American Rescue Plan, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act has powered strong job creation and low unemployment while staving off a recession that many thought inevitable, and far better, I should point out, than our peer countries. While Democrats are committed to supporting your efforts to cut costs for American families, I yield back.
We'll now welcome the testimony of Jerome Powell, the 16th chair of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Chair Powell, you'll be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation or testimony. Without objection, your written statement will be made a part of the record. You're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman McHenry, Ranking Member Waters, and other members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to present the Federal Reserve's semi-annual monetary policy report. The Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Over the past 2 years, the economy has made considerable progress toward the Federal Reserve's 2% inflation goal, and labor market conditions have cooled while remaining strong. Reflecting these developments, the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals are coming into better balance. I will review the current economic situation before turning to monetary policy. Recent indicators suggest that the U.S. economy continues to expand at a solid pace. Gross domestic product growth appears to have moderated in the first half of this year, following impressive strength in the second half of last year. Private domestic demand remains robust, however, with slower but still solid increases in consumer spending. We've also seen moderate growth in capital spending and a pickup in residential investment so far this year. Improving supply conditions have supported resilient demand and the strong performance of the U.S. economy over the past year. In the labor market, a broad set of indicators suggests that conditions have returned to about where they stood on the eve of the pandemic, strong but not overheated. The unemployment rate has moved higher, but was still at a low level of 4.1% in June. Payroll job gains averaged 222,000 jobs per month in the first half of the year. Strong job creation over the past couple of years has been accompanied by an increase in the supply of workers, reflecting increases in labor force participation among individuals aged 25 to 54 and a strong pace of immigration. As a result, the jobs to workers gap is well down from its peak and now stands just a bit above its 2019 level. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year. The strong labor market has helped narrow long-standing disparities in employment and earnings across demographic groups. Inflation has eased notably over the past couple of years, but remains above the committee's longer-run goal of 2%. Total PCE prices rose 2.6% over the 12 months ending in May. Core PCE prices, which exclude the volatile food and energy categories, also increased 2.6%. After a lack of progress toward our 2% inflation objective in the early part of this year, the most recent monthly readings have shown modest further progress. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. In support of these goals, the committee has maintained the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5% since last July, after having tightened the stance of monetary policy significantly over the previous year and a half. We've also continued to reduce our securities holdings. At our May meeting, we decided to slow the pace of balance sheet runoff starting in June, consistent with the plans released previously. Our restrictive monetary policy stance is helping to bring demand and supply into better balance and to put downward pressure on inflation. The committee has stated that we do not expect it will be appropriate to reduce the target range for the federal funds rate until we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. Incoming data for the first quarter of this year did not support such greater confidence. The most recent inflation readings, however, have shown some modest further progress, and more good data would strengthen our confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. We continue to make decisions meeting by meeting. We know that reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could stall or even reverse the progress that we've seen on inflation. At the same time, in light of the progress made both in lowering inflation and cooling the labor market over the past 2 years, elevated inflation is not the only risk we face. Reducing policy restraint too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will continue its practice of carefully assessing incoming data and their implications for the evolving outlook, the balance of risks, and the appropriate path of monetary policy. Congress has entrusted the Fed with the operational independence that is needed to take a longer-term perspective in the pursuit of our dual mandate of maximum employment and price stability. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Restoring price stability is essential to achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the long run.
All right, so a quick little look in at Powell. It sounds like they kind of saying the same stuff they've been saying. They don't have a lot of confidence that they're really bringing it back down to 2, but they're making progress. They're continuing to talk about it meeting to meeting, and that's their goal, and they'll get there, and yada yada yada. So it sounds like we might not have any rate cuts coming. Maybe keep even, keep level. It doesn't sound like they're expecting any rate hikes, which I guess is a good thing, but kind of status quo. So it affects a lot. I mean, interest rates, as the Federal Reserve rate goes up and down, it affects credit card rates, it affects car rates, mortgage rates, everything else that we use for borrowing. And so, a lot of people have been saying they're waiting for Federal rates to come down, so mortgage rates will come down, so get the housing market moving again. Right now, the housing market is just stuck. I mean, people that own homes are not selling. People that are looking for homes can't afford them. Renters are stuck in the middle of it because rent prices have gone so high because of the demand, because nobody's moving. It's created a big issue in housing in this country. It's a lot different. And then you have different sides of the fence. Some people think it's going to end way worse than 08. Some people think it's just going to kind of be a smooth landing and it's nothing like 08. Who knows, man? Who knows how that's going to play out right there? But I do know that consumer credit and debt continues to drastically rise. Here's a new report just came out. U.S. revolving credit, meaning credit cards, grew by $7.2 billion, plus 6.3% in May to 1.345 trillion, up from 1.338 trillion recorded in April. So we grew 6%, $7 billion in revolving credit card debt. Consumer credit and credit card use continues to outpace the Fed's 2% inflation growth goal, of course. So we're continuing to see that increase. The national debt continues to be a big issue. We're almost at $35 trillion in national debt. Interest payments now exceed defense spending. So big trouble when it comes to debt in this country. And again, this is why becoming your own bank and understanding sound money and foundational money is so very, very important. So again, we'll get back into that a little bit more at 1 o'clock today on the Wealth webinar. A fun story that came out, a follow-up from the debate. So if you guys watched the debate, it kind of ended with Trump and Biden arguing over who was a better golfer. Biden claimed he had a 6 handicap. Trump said, "I've seen you golf. There's no way you have a 6 handicap," and basically challenged him to a round of golf. So President Trump yesterday at a rally made that an official challenge. So let's play this fun little short video. Trump makes an official challenge. He challenges Biden to an 18-hole match, says he'll give Biden 20-stroke advantage, and if he loses, he'll donate $1 million to the charity of Biden's choice.
I'm also officially challenging Cricket Joe to an 18-hole golf match right here. Underal's Blue Monster, considered one of the greatest tournament golf courses anywhere in the world, one of the great courses of the world. It will be among the most watched sporting events in history, maybe bigger than the Ryder Cup or even the Masters. And I will even give Joe Biden 10 strokes aside. 10 strokes, that's a lot. That means 20 strokes in case you don't play golf. I will give him 10 strokes aside, and if he wins, I will give the charity of his choice, any charity that he wants, $1 million. And I'll bet you he doesn't take the offer. I'm also officially challenging Cricket Joe to an 18-hole golf match right here. Underal's Blue Monster, considered one of the greatest.
All right, so just a little funness. I did see Biden came out this morning and declined the invitation for the challenge, which is unfortunate. I do think that it would have been a lot of fun because these guys are brutal to watch debating on stage and just rambling at their at each of their different rallies and conferences and whatnot. And I think on a golf course, that's where things could really be determined. So, hopefully Biden changes his mind, decides to take him up on that offer. I don't think physically that's even possible at this point, but it would have been fun in my opinion. With that being said, looks like we're about at the top of the hour here. So I think what I'll do is last week we ended with 4 minutes of Kamala Harris, possibly the 2024 presidential front runner or presidential nominee. We'll see what happens. But last week we played 4 minutes of Kamala saying over and over and over and over and over and over again for 4 straight minutes. Once has been unburdened by what can be, or something of that nature. 4 minutes of that. It's one of her favorite phrases. But we also know that Kamala loves Venn diagrams. She loves to request Venn diagrams, explain Venn diagrams, talk about Venn diagrams. Maybe it makes her feel like she's smart. I don't know. But let me just end today's What the F with a couple minutes. Let's just do 60 seconds of it. Let's do 60 seconds of Kamala Harris talking about Venn diagrams, just for fun. Appreciate you guys being here today. If you log off, and we'll see you at 1 o'clock for the Wealth webinar.
Remember Venn diagrams, those 3 circles, right? And then let's just see where they overlap.
You will not be surprised because I have constructed a Venn diagram on this. Remember those 3 circles, how they overlap?
I love Venn diagrams. So I just do. Whenever you're dealing with conflict, pull out a Venn diagram, right? And so, the 3 circles. And so I asked my team, right? They're fantastic.
He sees the Venn diagram of it all. He sees that there are those circles, and maybe people seem that they're a little different. They live in different parts of the country. They may be different age or different race, but that area in the middle, that overlap.
I asked my team to do a Venn diagram of where these attacks are happening. So voting rights, women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights. And of course, there was a huge intersection. I asked my team to do a Venn diagram for me of where we are seeing attacks and who are the attacks against and the similarity. And when you look at a diagram of just a Venn diagram in that regard, it tells a real tale.
All right. Well, you had to hear first. We're going to teach about Venn diagrams. Maybe I'll even draw one on Wealth Webinar today at 1 p.m. So with that being said, thanks for being here, guys. It's been fun. We will see you next week. Chris will be here. Actually, I will not be here for What the F next week. I'll be down in the Keys with the family, out doing some snorkeling and enjoying the sunshine, kind of wrapping up the end of my son's summer vacation. And with that said, we'll see you guys at 1 o'clock today, though. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.